It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. I have to say, we meet people in amazing places. And a few months ago, I was at a business event, and I had the pleasure to meet our guest today. Verinoka Sikorski, and you're going to make sure I pronounce this right, is the president and CEO of ELM Suspension Systems. So, listeners, you're going to say, okay, what does that mean? It's a family-owned suspended scaffold rental company in the New York metropolitan area. Okay, so when you pass in any city you're walking by, you have the big scaffolds. That is Veronika's company. She has extensive experience in rigging and keen knowledge of the industry through practices and products, allowing ELM to focus on invigorating rigging solutions. She is a generational business. Can't wait for Veronika to share some of the background and her story of how this landed in her field of brilliance. Welcome, Veronika. Thank you for joining me here today on Her Success Story.
Thank you for having me. It is absolutely my pleasure.
So how did this whole, there's family businesses, rigging, scaffolding is within the area of the construction industry. So I was trying to give our listeners a context of when you're passing big buildings in large cities, anywhere in the world, you will see some sort of scaffolding protecting the people, right? During construction on a building. So how did this become your career, let alone you become a CEO of ELM?
That is a very good question. I have to say, I get that question fairly often. Most people don't actually think about scaffolding unless it's put up on their home or their business. It's much more prevalent, obviously, in bigger cities, especially here in New York, because of the population and all of the work that's ongoing. So, scaffolding, how did I get into scaffolding? So, I almost want to say I grew up in it. My father is an engineer by education. My parents are immigrants. We came here from Poland when I was very young. So I'm Polish, but I grew up here. I went to school here. And my father, in his sort of job search, ended up working for a company called Spider Staging, which was sort of the predominant leader in the New York City area in the 80s and 90s. And so he, through his career, basically ended up running the New York City branch of Spider. And then after a period of time, mid 90s, ended up joining our company, which is ELM. So our company specifically focuses on suspended scaffolding. So when
Explain what that is.
Yes. So when most people in New York think of scaffolding, they think of what's called sidewalk bridges, right? So sidewalk protection for pedestrians. Right? So making sure that nothing falls from the building and hits somebody on the ground. There are also other types of scaffolding, like supported scaffolding, which goes from the ground up or from the sidewalk bridge up. But what we do is suspended scaffolding. So we install equipment on the roof and then suspend it over the side for usually, I would say, restoration contractors or sometimes facade installers, there are a number of different potential end users, but mostly for restoration to work on the outside of buildings. So that is our company focus. And I grew up watching my dad go and work in scaffolding every day. I am one of 4 girls in our family. My father, I think he probably would have liked to have a son, but he had 4 girls. And
surprise, Dad, you got 4 daughters and your household is spinning.
Exactly. But he and I, personality-wise, were always matched very well. We just really liked being around each other. And so even when I was growing up, when my dad was renovating our house and he was going to the lumber yard, I was the person that he took with him, right? And he would teach me how to spackle the wall and, I would help him with home improvement projects. So I wouldn't say that I grew up thinking that this was my career path because I really didn't. I graduated high school, I went to college, and I took a job after college here in the New York area because I knew I love New York. I've always wanted to live here. And then eventually, he had started to ask me probably when I was in high school about whether or not I would join him in this family business of ours.
Wow.
And I think part of it was he could see something in me, whether it was a personality match or a skill, something. I have never actually asked him about it, but if I had to guess, he probably picked something out in me that he saw that would be a match for our type of business. I said no many times before I said yes. But eventually, I had been working for a larger company and became really frustrated with sort of the difficulties of getting something done, right? The levels of approval and how so many decisions were made that I felt in my very naive young 20s time of life that affected
How do
me
we move this
negatively.
stuff forward? Why can't we move it forward faster?
Right. Or how could you cut the budget for the project that I've been working for 2 years on, right?
And
And
there is that.
there right? And so in the process of telling this to my father, his response was, "Well, if you really want to have an impact, you should come and work with me because it's a lot easier to make decisions in a smaller company. You have a lot more say." And I just think back at that of me being 23 years old and thinking that I had some sort of say over some big corporate project, right? It did strike a chord with me. And I have always, like I mentioned, had a really close relationship with my father. And it's very difficult, I think, in a generational business to work with family.
Let's talk about that because I worked with my dad. I got recruited into to sell printing for his company, and I had spent probably about 6, 7 years prior working for two different women-led companies. It was
Big
A,
change.
that was a rude awakening, B, then going to work for your father. And I tell a little story sometimes of like, in the negotiation alone, I felt like we were walking down like 42nd Street in Manhattan, and we might have been on the same street, but we were on two opposite, going in two different directions. I was hearing and saying one thing, he was hearing and saying another, and it took a while, and it took a few bumping heads
Yes.
to be heard as a leader, to be heard as the knowledge of business that I had acquired over the years, which obviously wasn't about how many years he had acquired, but I also like, I felt I had some knowledge. I had some. So how did that transformation at the transition? I'm going to go, not the transformation, the transition. When you and your dad started working together, what was that like for you stepping into the role of working with your dad? And I'm going to throw a shout out here of not just the construction industry, which is male dominated, but the scaffolding rigging industry, which is a closed boys club.
You could say that. Yes. It's interesting. I felt when I started working with my father that I had a number of things against me. I was young, I
Yeah.
was female, and I was a legacy. And quite honestly, I didn't have an engineering background, so I had a little bit of a handicap there as well. When I started in the office. I ran our office. I was the office manager. I answered the phone, I issued the invoices, and eventually, once I sort of got, a little bit of experience, I would start taking orders from the customers over the phone and I would write contracts. And it was really, I would say, a very slow progression from, my first year or two where I really didn't know anything until the time where my father basically retired. So now he is not an active partner in our business anymore. He is still remains my partner, but he doesn't come to the office. He'll come to say hello. He'll come to feel included and to check in on things. And if I ask him to come and help, he will absolutely always do that. But my father's 82 years old. So
Right.
he was in his 60s when we started working together. And he spent a lot of time with me, multiple stages, to teach me many things that I needed to know about our equipment, about rigging, about customer service, about accounting, because especially when we began, we're a very small company and we did everything. We really did. He was our finance guy, our operations guy,
Customer service guy or a sales guy.
exactly. He
It
did
was the
everything.
small company that the leader, the CEO, the owner, just hold on, let me turn my desk chair around. I'm going to put this hat on for the next hour. And then let me turn my desk chair around again. And I'm going to put this hat on for the next hour.
Exactly right. So I think when I joined him, he felt a sense of relief because he was no longer that person, right? He had sort of what I eventually became his right-hand person. So I think for him, it was a relief because he trusted me, right? But in terms of just sort of how that progression went, it was difficult, but it was difficult only because it took a lot of time. I never felt like he didn't think I was the right person to take over for him. I think in the beginning, he mentioned a few times to me, well, at some point, you're probably going to have to hire a technical person because you don't have that background, right? You're not a mechanic, you're not an electrician. Our equipment is electric hanging scaffolds primarily. So I think in the beginning, he thought that that was a blind spot for me. But as the many years went by, and as I ran the office, then I ran the warehouse, then I ran the field, and then sort of stepped into my role, which I have now. But the personality issue was never. We didn't have any issues. We never fought when it came to work.
That's
Right.
great.
What's difficult, I think, in a generational business is having that line of we may have family issues that we have to discuss, right? I'm sure you're laughing because you know this, right? And keeping that separate from work issues is very
Correct.
difficult.
It's a dotted line. And,
Yes.
and I think that's how I used to refer to it as the dotted line. Okay, well, we're with a family thing now. We're not going to talk work, but like a couple of lines can be broken through, but not a lot. Or we're at work now and there's the dotted line, and we might have to talk about this celebration or blah, blah, blah. But we have to remember we can't do a lot of that because we have to focus here.
Right.
This is our work time together. I used to think about it as that dotted line. You can go in a little bit, but you can't go far.
Exactly right. So we have a very interesting situation that my parents are from Poland and my first language was Polish.
Right.
So when we are home or anytime we're speaking to each other and we're speaking about family or family related things, we speak Polish. But when we were in the office, we would speak English. So we had the language sort of distinguish, I guess, divide, which I actually found really helpful. Very, very helpful. It really made it clear what we were talking about. Right. So I think that was
Love that.
helpful. But that's the thing about generational businesses, really, is that mixing the two is very difficult, especially when you're not in alignment on one of the two issues, right? Or God forbid, both. Right. But he was very good about that. And I think I was very good about that, about keeping that sort of divide between the two sides of our relationship. And then when it was time, when he really was looking to step away, and I will tell you, I do not think that I was ready. I do not think that I was ready, but I never felt like he wasn't ready. I never felt like he never made me feel like he didn't think I was the right person or that I was qualified. He always had so much confidence in me, and that gave me so much.
It's interesting because, I think sometimes I ask the question of what does ready look like? How do we know when we're ready? What does ready look like? And there's no playbook there.
There is not. There is not. And I will tell you, I am very cautious as a business person, as an individual. It doesn't take me long to make a decision, but I feel like sometimes I think that I need to have been doing this for this long for me to be qualified, right? And and we don't need to do that, right? And that's really one thing I think for women in particular is we often feel like we are not ready, but we should just start, right? We should just
Yeah.
start. Just do it. And I now looking back at it, it was not intentional for me to when I joined the industry, right? I didn't think, okay, I'm just going to start even though I don't know anything. But I did kind of have that inkling when I took over for my dad. I did not feel ready. I had had a many years of experience by that point, but I wasn't the primary contact person at our company then. I just started. I just took over projects. I just called customers and I said, "My dad is stepping away. You should talk to me if you need something." And that's really a recommendation I think I would have for women who are thinking about entering an industry that is a little foreign to them.
A question's coming up for me is, as we talked about, construction's male dominated in most areas, not as much anymore. Yet it's very male dominated in the area of scaffolding and rigging.
Yes.
How did you gain, when we talk about business, gaining know, like, and trust? Gaining the know, like, and trust is doing business, right? How did you start making your way, gaining the know, like, and trust with your clients, your vendors, your supply, right? Because that's such a huge piece in leading a company.
I agree with that. That all just took time. It took time and it took, I say this a lot, you have to see a lot of rooftops before you're qualified to recommend what the right solution is, right?
Right.
So it was in the beginning showing up with my dad at the job site and then showing up by myself at the job site and then being the person to call the customer, being the person to send the proposal, being the person to follow up with the vendor. It was really just doing, doing, doing.
Yeah, keep showing up is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
Is you just keep
Absolutely.
showing up.
Yes. And in the beginning, I'm not going to lie, I definitely got comments about, well, okay, but can I talk to Eugene? I just want to run that past him first. Right. And like you mentioned, our industry is sort of a boys' club.
Yeah,
It is
and so many industries have
so
been,
many.
and they're transforming, and which is why we're having this conversation today.
Right. Exactly. And you're right. I would say I don't, nationwide. So on the New York City front, that's really where my involvement is in our industry, just because New York City's rules and regulations are so much stricter than the nationwide ones. So I'm not super involved on the national front with the Scaffolding Association, but I do go to the annual convention and I see more and more women, right, which is super inspiring. I think
That's fabulous, and
it is
it thrills me because it means that things are evolving.
correct.
And
Yes.
evolution takes time. We don't change, we don't just move a needle. We take baby steps, and the baby steps add up.
Yes, exactly right. And I am confident that that will happen more on the local front as well. So the scaffolding industry is really sort of a subset of the restoration industry, right, in New York City, which again has a lot of generational businesses, primarily father to son. But I am sure that that is going to be changing. I feel super confident about that.
So one of the things I admire about you, Veronica, is as you took on the role of CEO, as you took on more and more responsibility, you stepped into the associations, the organizations, and just didn't play as a wallflower, very honestly. You really took on leadership roles. Can you share a little bit of, first of all, why did you do that? Like, what was it, a thought process, or was it a plan? Did you, what part of you started not just showing up at those meetings and say, hey, I'm here, okay, I'm doing my job, versus stepping up and stepping out?
So I mean, I have to just thank everybody that was involved in sort of accepting me onto the board, right? So the Special Riggers Association represents the licensed riggers in New York City, and now our organization has expanded a bit more, where we represent a lot of the scaffolding companies and access providers for our industry. And the organization was formed because our membership group, needed to have a pathway to discuss with the city government about the different laws that are in effect that affect us. And when I was asked to join the board, I got my special riggers license in 2016, right? So, and I joined the board in 2017. So, along with many
You
other.
really jump right in there.
Well, but I've always felt that in order to have a say, you have to be involved. right?
Well
And
said.
joining the association, I have to say, our board members put in so much work. We are all volunteers, right? And a lot of the work that we do is just most people don't want to do it, right?
It's a
It
lot of work to be on a board.
it is a lot of work, and people see our accomplishments, but they don't see the years of work that people put in behind the scenes to to make those changes, right? And to raise awareness within the city government, state government about our association. The amount of work that all the board members have put into our association is really amazing. But that's the thing. I never joined the board thinking that I wasn't also going to give a corresponding amount of my time as well. And I think also for me, I'm a supplier, right? So I have access to so many of our members because they call me and they ask questions, or they call me to tell me about their issues, which I can then use as information to communicate to DOB and to communicate to the board. So it's super beneficial for me because I'm able to touch so many more people. But really,
And you're gaining firsthand, moment by moment knowledge.
yes, yes,
And
knowledge.
you're then able to take that and put that information not just into the association, but into your knowledge in your own business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want my customers and potential customers to come to me for information, even if they never buy anything from me,
Yeah.
right? Because the better we are about being transparent about what's happening, within the city and the rules that might be changing and how we should be doing business, right? How the city wants us to conduct business for safety reasons, obviously for that, the better we are, right? So that's really the association has helped me a lot in that sort of professional development.
It makes an enormous amount of sense. And you have, as I followed you, you have done an enormous amount of speaking and leading panels and putting yourself out there, which very often is an uncomfortable place to get used to being, to be very honest. Coming on, coming onto podcasts and I see you're up for awards, you're involved in so much. I want to ask this question. Have you thought about the impact as the leader that you make on the next generation coming down your own kids by your leadership?
Yes, of course. I have two girls that are 10 and 12 right now.
Clearly comes through the family.
It does. It does. We are very female dominant, which which is great, which I love. I want my girls to see that, like you said, that their mom steps into roles that are leadership roles. And I also want them to see that sometimes it's a bit uncomfortable for me because it is. It's not, I wouldn't say I'm a natural public speaker. I wouldn't say that I think I should get awards. There's definitely a little bit of me that thinks, wow, is this a for me thing, right? Or am I, or I get nervous or I'm not sure about it. So I want them to know that this is something that we can do. I want them to know that it's okay for us to feel a little apprehensive about it or a little nervous about it. And there's a big value to just showing up, right?
Oh, touche. There is such a value of just showing up.
Just showing up. Yes, yes. And not only for my daughters, like you said, other people in the industry, right? I just heard through a contact that there is a company who does restoration where there's someone's daughter who's a young woman who is thinking about stepping into a bigger role within that company. I don't know her. I really don't. I don't know her father. I don't know her, but I'm cheering her on silently from the
Already.
sidelines, right? Because I want this for not just women, right? But it is harder if you're a woman, I think. So I do want other women in our industry to see that it is possible and doable. And I want it to become just as normal as a son stepping into his father's shoes.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I think it's takes one step at a time, one woman at a time. You don't bring 100 women in and then change see,
Right.
we're already at 35%, but it's one woman stepping up. It's one daughter stepping up. It's the next woman stepping up. There's the next woman engineer who said, I've always enjoyed doing this and this is my industry, and creating ways and pathways for them and wait people like you, Veronica, to follow. Yeah.
If they want to, right? I
Yeah,
think that's what's
exactly.
really important. I've seen generational businesses that have gone out of business because the next generation does not want to do this, right?
Correct.
And we shouldn't be excluding daughters, right? Because maybe it is within their wheelhouse, within their desires, within their skill set. They shouldn't be excluded as an option, right? It is absolutely a possibility for them.
I want to ask you this. What has surprised you in your journey?
Oh, that's a good question. What has surprised me? I will say that I really felt like, and I can't pinpoint a particular moment, but there was something about stepping into the role after my father retired that really just clicked for me. And it was surprising to me that I could have done this for however many years and I didn't feel that way. And there was some sort of confidence that came from some moment or some combination of moments that really made me feel like this is where I'm supposed to be.
I love that. And it's sometimes it just shows up out of the blue, but I will say it's so often attributed to the years of the baby steps we've taken, you know,
Many, many days of showing up, even on the days where you don't want to.
on to.
And you know what, I would almost say, now that I'm thinking about it, that there came a moment where I realized that I needed to work on what I didn't know, right? And that was a mind shift too of I spent X number of years, let's say 15 years of my career, learning everything I needed or wanted to know about scaffolding, about access, about rigging, about options, about manufacturers, about rooftops, about obstructions. And then at some point I was like, wow, if I'm going to be a CEO, I should really work on my financial knowledge, right?
Right.
And that gave me so much confidence, right? Is knowing what you know and acknowledging that that's part of your expertise, but then also shoring up the areas where you're not super strong. And knowing, well, I'm not really great at this, so I should hire for that, right? So there's a whole sort of professional development kind of mind. You know what I mean? Where it just sort of clicked for me and I was like, okay, this is what I need to do if I'm really going to do this well.
I think it makes an enormous amount of sense. And I think there's an attitude of being that lifelong learner, of,
Yes,
always being open, always being willing to lean in, to learn what's next, to like embrace more. I'll always say, like, technology and it's like, okay, I know enough to be dangerous, yet I lean in to learn so much about technology because I'm just fascinated on all the ways it could be a resource.
absolutely.
Right. And so it's that consistency of being, I think great leadership is very much about leaning in to learn on a consistent basis.
Every day I learn something. Every day, every job, I learn something different. I consider it from a different angle. Every day, even every hiccup, right? It gives us a different perspective or a different solution. Or yes, all lifelong learner. I agree.
So, Veronica, thank you so much for joining me here today on Her Success Story. I will say to our listeners, this is when I always say, take a breath and think about, in the conversation Veronica and I had today that covered a variety of different things, what was that number one thing that resonated for you? What was the one aha? What was the one thing you're taking away? Jot it down somewhere and then make that decision. What action are you going to take with that one thing? Her success stories, we're blessed and lucky to have so many wonderful, wonderful people that share such great knowledge. We can't implement all of it all the time, right? But each time you listen, find that one thing that will make an impact for you. And if it's helpful and you found it helpful, please share it forward to others and hit subscribe. And we come into your inbox every Monday morning with great guests like Veronika, the CEO of ELM. And if you want to know more about the construction industry, if you want to know more about scaffolding, Veronika, how can our listeners find out more from you?
Please, by all means, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or by my email. I would absolutely love to talk to anybody that had any more questions.
I love it. Listeners, Enjoy the rest of your day. Feel free to leave a comment and share with us what your one thing was today. See you next time.